YouTube. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and I have another review for you guys. My last video was on my review of The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. Well, this time I'm going to review Ross Poldark by Winston Graham. This is was actually turned into a TV series on PBS, it says on the top here, hence the cover of this one. So this is during the time when America had just separated from England and we won the war. And Ross was part of that war, and he has just returned to the Cornish coast and ready to, help his father out and marry his beloved Elizabeth. And unfortunately, when he gets home, his father's already died. His family, his home is like falling apart. The only people left are the two servants, two of his servants, and who are still living in his house. And Elizabeth has married his cousin, Francis. So Ross is hurt, he's angry, but he is determined to rebuild his life. Now his family, the Poldark family, has owned, I think they're a mining family, so they own a lot of mines. And of course, his family's mines are like not doing too well, so he basically has to rebuild everything and also try to move on from Elizabeth and get over it. And that is really, not only is rebuilding his life is a lot easier, I think, than him getting over Elizabeth. One night, he ends up coming across, witnesses these people being the people in the community being entertained by a dog and a cat being tied together and struggling. And this teenage girl, at first he thinks it's a boy, actually. This teenage kid shows up and comes to defense to help the dog and the cat, and because especially since the dog belongs to this young woman, and the others and the people do not appreciate her taking away their entertainment, so they're getting ready to attack her. Of course, like I said, they don't realize she's a girl, and Ross comes to the young person's aid, and of course he realizes this is a young girl, and he ends up taking her home with him because he finds out and learns that her father is a drunk and abusive towards her. So he offers to give her work and let her live with him. But of course, she's a teenage girl, and having a young teenager in the home of a single man, and not only that, but he basically took her from her father without permission. Well, that does not look good. And there are all these rumors about the two of them. So basically, that's the premise of the book. It's him rebuilding his life, his relationship with this girl, Demelsda, and trying to cope with the fact that Elizabeth is now married to his cousin, and trying not to get jealous. And there are a lot of mothers who are trying to fix him up with their daughters. And so I enjoyed this. I thought this was a great book. I mean, it was not an all-time favorite. It's only the first book in a series, and I will continue. I mean, I have almost all the books, at least 11 of the books. I'm missing book 4. But it's kind of a slow plot. I mean, not a lot is going on. It's just the day-to-day life of Ross, and you also occasionally spend time with the other people in his life, the other people of the community, and there are rivals from other communities with this community. And like in a Trollope novel or a Jane Austen novel, there's people gossiping, and like I said, there's a lot of rumors about Ross's relationship with Demelsda. And when he first meets her, she's 13. Although I hear that they aged, she's 16 in the show, so I wonder if they decide to age her up a little bit because one, there's a difference between a 13-year-old girl and a 16-year-old girl. Like as far as your physical appearance, there's a little bit of a difference. So I imagine that it was also they wouldn't have to take forever to with the season. They could take their time with the season, and they can get like I don't know how many episodes, but probably like 10 or something, or maybe even 8 episodes per season. I don't know. Um, so and also that was the only one of the negatives about this is that she when he first met her she was 13. So in my modern mind it's a little icky to me, even though now I don't like even though nothing happened between them. Ross was a gentleman and was always respectful and just saw her as yes, he enjoyed her company, but not in a inappropriate way. She just worked for him, and she probably had a little bit of a crush on him, but it wasn't anything. Like I said, no inappropriateness until she was like close to being an adult that anything happened between them. Um, but it was so it wasn't. It's just it felt a little weird because I do know that their relationship changes book two. It's a very different dynamic, and but it's like my modern sensibilities just kind of got in the way a little bit. It's like that's a little icky now, and it's because I know what's gonna happen between the two of them later. But at the same time, it is a historical story written in. It's set in the 1700s. So, and that, I mean, people were often engaged at a very young age. I mean, you had royals being engaged since they were babies. So, I guess, and I mean, it's a weird place to be because it's like if you read historical fiction, especially before the 20th century, you gotta accept the fact that that's gonna happen. It's like, and I'm not criticizing the book because that like I said that was normal back then. I mean, like it's weird to my modern mindset, but it was normal for them. I mean, so it's like I guess one of the things you just get past, but then do I need to get past it? Like maybe I mean it didn't take away my enjoyment of the story. It was just like a little weird aspect of the story that I was like, oh, I did not realize that she was when they first met she was really young. She was early teens. Um, like I guess I would have felt better if she was like 16 from the start. But like I said, it doesn't hinder my enjoyment. It's just something that I notice about the story. Ross is an interesting guy because there's times when he is a little too harsh on Demelsda before anything even happens between the two of them. He can be kind of stern, a little too stern in my opinion. But he's still a good guy, and he's a good friend to the people in his life, his family and friends. Um, and of course, sometimes some of these guys from this time period, some of their mentalities kind of. That's another thing about when you read historical fiction. Sometimes the mentalities of men, the way they thought back then, can be a little. You gotta put that your modern mindset aside and just accept that's how people thought back then. That's how men were. That was perfectly normal for them to have a little bit of a sexist mentality, and it wouldn't have been considered sexist back then. But I still liked his character. He was a very caring person, and was always trying to help fight for the rights of people in his life, the people that he think deserve justice. But there was also times when he was called out on his BS and when he was in the wrong, like and by Demelsda, she was not afraid to call him out. But at times she did worry about making sure he's still he still wanted her around because there was always in the beginning there's always that fear of her father coming back and wanting to take her back. And he does show up a couple times trying to claim her and forcing her to return home. And there was always that fear, which I think is probably why she's at times she could be afraid of Ross. which that'd be interesting to analyze her character a little bit. But I do feel like I want to read, because the second book is called Demelsda, so it's her book, I'm guessing. So we kind of probably could get more content, so I can do a character discussion on her after reading that book. I might do that, if I remember to do it. But so yeah, she was very interesting because she was tough and could take care of herself, but there was also times when you could tell that because of the abuse she experienced from her father, sometimes she struggled with standing up for herself, and she was very insecure, and she did not like to upset Ross. I mean, like she wasn't completely submissive, but there were times when she did worry about him being mad at her and disappointing him, and so they definitely have a very complicated relationship. I know it's going to get worse because, like I said, I was a little spoiled for what's going to happen because I caught glimpses of the show, so I'm guessing the show follows the story. I mean, there are times, of course, I know that some adaptations don't always follow. Like I've heard, I think people have said that the in Bridgerton, it's definitely doing its own thing now. But so I don't know, but so I'm assuming it's following the books, the show. So I'm assuming what the bits and pieces I've seen of the show are, or what's gonna happen in the book. But anyway, I really liked Verity's character. She was very sweet and caring and a very good person, but I also was very frustrated with her because I think she should have stand up for herself a little bit more. But again, the time period, it's like, am I being a little too critical of these women? Because, I probably am. That these women are from a time period where a lot of times women were basically, it was ingrained in them to be a little more submissive, and they had to be little angels and good girls, and they weren't always, fighters. And I think also the environment that Verity and Elizabeth grew up in. So Verity is the sister of Francis, Ross's cousin, so they're cousins. But so like the environment they grew up, they probably weren't really allowed to be feisty and fight back all the time. And while Demelsda, at least she had an abusive father, but she was in the real world. She had to be scrappy, had to be a fighter, had to defend herself and protect herself against people out in the regular, common man, another commoner, because she was out in the streets trying to get away from her father. There also is, like, with her father story, there is discussion of religion a little bit, and I'm guessing it's going to be part of it a little bit more, maybe in the second book, but there is this sense of her father was saved and redeems himself, supposedly, that he's become better, and that he's, and he's like, oh, I've changed, and he's like, oh, I want you, you can come home now because I'm better now. And oh, I'm remarried someone, and at one point he shows up being like, I need you to help me with my wife, because that's your job, your responsibility. Which I'm thinking, no, it's not, because of the way you were with your daughter, you lost that privilege to play the father figure to her a long time ago. So her dad, I could not stand her dad. We also have Francis. He was okay in the beginning, but I think he's gonna grow into a very unlikable character, a very unkind person, because he seemed nice enough and caring enough in the beginning, but then as we see later on, he becomes very much like he's a gambler, and he's kind of absent in the whole raising of their child, because him and Elizabeth end up having a baby. And actually they made me think a little bit of Peter and Alice from Gone in the Woods. I mean, that relationship, it's a different time, but similar dynamics. with the husband who, the father husband slash father who's, he's kind of absent, and he leaves the responsibility to other people to take care of the baby, and he just wants them to make sure his kid is grows up and does a good job at representing him, which I'm sure he learned that, Francis learned that from his father. Because his father was not that great of a guy either. Like, Ross's family, they're all kind of, Verity and Elizabeth are not as bad, but Elizabeth, of course, is not part of his biological family anyway. But Verity's actually nice. I like her. But a lot of his family are just like, they're all kind of jerks and very snobby. So, and it's understandable why Demelza ends up being very wary around them whenever they, she is in their path outside of Ross. She's very wary of them and worries about what they'll think of her and how they'll judge her. And yes, there's a lot of characters that do, a lot of characters that drink in this book. There's a lot of characters that are, are drunks and alcoholics, and so there's a lot of that. And we also, I appreciate that Graham Winston did include, make sure that the character that, Demelza, for instance, she sounded like where she came from. She had that kind of dialect. Although it was a little hard to read at times when I first started reading, when those first parts came into the story, where she would be speaking, I did stumble a little bit, because of course it's in a way, it's his own dialect. But it really, it helped show her differences and how she comes from a completely different world, and it has a different way of speaking at times, and she does, when she's working for Ross, she has to kind of tone that down a little bit and learn how to be a little more, more well-spoken. Which, I can see where that can be interpreted as him taming her a little bit, but I think it's, I don't think he's trying to, at least I don't think he's trying to erase her, who she is, where she comes from. It's just he knows that the people in his world will judge her. And then it doesn't, in that, in any world, being polite around people and speaking, properly, it does help you out in the real world a lot. It does help you get by in the world and get a little bit more respect from people, because, no, what else can I say about this book? There's a subplot with Verity and this guy, Captain Blamey, but he has a bit of, he has some bad history. He was an alcoholic himself, and supposedly he killed his wife. He was seen as abusive, so they're, and he and Verity fall in love, but of course, her father and brother don't like this because of that. They learn these rumors about this captain and Captain Blamey, and, kind of chase him away. But Verity believes that he is not as bad as they seem, and he has improved his, hasn't had a drink, and he's trying to better his life and redeem himself. But unfortunately, that's not enough for her father or brother. And I'm trying to think. There was one other character that ends up. There's also a plot line where a young man who works for Ross, he ends up going on trial because he has a friend that was got him into poaching, and they end up on someone's land, and they get caught, or at least Ross's friend, the kid, ends up getting caught. And there's also a plot with him and this woman he's in love with, and they end up getting married, and especially because she has another man who's trying to go after her, and so it has similar, it does similar things to that Trollope's novels and Jane Austen's novels, where there's a lot of drama, and it's kind of the day-to-day life of these characters and their relationship with other people, whether romantic or friendship. Yeah, so it was good. I liked it. It's a good first book in a series introducing you to all the characters and this world, this environment, and it wasn't like the best book ever, but it was still a good start to a series, and I am gonna read all the books in the series. So, that is Ross Poldark by Graham Winston. So if it sounds interesting to you, check it out. I think it's pretty good. There's 12 books altogether in the whole series. So it's a bit of a long one. But anyway, the books aren't super long though. Or at least this one wasn't too long. It was, let's see how many pages. 376. So it's close to 400 pages. So still, that's not that long. Anyway, like I said, I hope you found this review interesting and you'll consider checking this book out if it's your cup of tea. And I hope you are enjoying whatever you're reading, and I will talk to you all later. All right, bye!